It began quietly, as these things often do. In January 1949, a 14-year-old boy from Cottage City, Maryland, known only by the pseudonym Roland Doe, started hearing scratching behind the walls. Family diaries note that the sound came from inside the boy's bedroom, where a small framed picture of Christ periodically shook loose from its nail. The first report described it as a mouse problem. Then the family maid, dismissed that winter, murmured a final warning. "He keeps calling something through that board." She was referring to the boy's Ouija board, a game bought after his aunt's death. Everyone thought it was nonsense, a coping trick, a prank, but the noises spread, the events recorded. Today, in the Jesuit archives of St. Louis, stands a sealed wooden box labeled Only Case 1949. Inside, copies of the priest's notes survive. Decades later, Hollywood softened this story, but the marks on those pages remain. Cottage City was a quiet, working-class suburb of Washington, D.C. That winter of 1949, neighbors remembered the cold, the kind that sharpened every sound inside thin-walled houses. 14-year-old Roland, bookish and withdrawn, had recently lost his beloved Aunt Harriet, a spiritualist who introduced him to parlor seances. After her death, the boy began experimenting alone with her Ouija board. Family sources recorded small disturbances, a swinging lamp chain, a scraping in the attic. In a March 1949 interview, neighbor Mrs. Eckerd told a reporter, "We thought he was just restless from grief. The wood floors creaked under sudden temperature shifts. Radiators hissed messages only the boy claimed to understand." By mid-January, furniture moved when Roland was near. His mother noted in tight, controlled script, "The heavy bureau slid across the floor, yet his hands were still." It was entered into the family's daily logbook, preserved later by the first investigating minister, Reverend Luther Schultz of St. James Lutheran Church. The pages show coffee stains, hesitation marks where the pen paused. Early disbelief pervaded. Schultz assumed psychosomatic causes, but he kept the diary. His handwriting, initially steady, grew jagged by February. The final entries shake with either haste or uncertainty. Reverend Schultz, a practical man with 20 years of parish work, requested a series of controlled observations beginning February 17th. He saw the boy's bed tremble, the sheets tightening as if pulled beneath the mattress. Outside, winter rain tapped against the windows. Inside, the ticking of the mantel clock stopped each time the disturbances began. Schultz documented everything in clinical style: hours, temperature, voices present, the methodical approach of a man determined to find rational explanation. Later extracts, archived in the Lutheran Historical Society, reveal a conflict between pastoral duty and doubt. At 8:30 p.m., the child was placed on chair. Vibration persisted. No visible trickery. Family exhausted. Will consult. Catholic clergy. The paper bears coffee rings, like concentric ripples of hesitation. Schultz initially treated it as psychological grief. But when holy water flicked onto the boy, hissed upon contact, a detail confirmed by two witnesses, the Keener cousins, he sent the case to the Catholic Archbishopric of Washington. The letter of referral, preserved in diocesan records, shows unusually formal language from a Lutheran minister to Catholic authorities. His final pastoral note, dated February 27, reads only, "Family terrified, requesting higher authority." The handwriting slopes downward across the page. On February 28, Father Albert Hughes of St. James Catholic Church arrived at the house. Rain drummed against the roof. The clock on the mantel ticked in irregular patterns. His subsequent report, found later among chancery records, describes a harrowing but ambiguous encounter. Hughes interviewed the boy, who alternated between silence and sudden guttural speech. A scratch appeared on his chest, bearing what witnesses described as relig, incomplete before bleeding abruptly. The temperature in the room dropped enough that breath fogged in the air. Pipes in the walls knocked in sequences of 3. During a nighttime prayer, a bottle of holy water shattered against the wall, glass fragments embedding in the plaster. Hughes attempted a brief Roman rite of exorcism without authorization, a procedural mistake later noted by diocesan authorities. The boy broke free from restraints, wounding Hughes's arm with a mattress spring. Hospital records show Father Hughes required 7 stitches. Within hours, he requested medical evaluation for the boy. Georgetown University Hospital performed neurological and psychiatric tests. None indicated mania or epilepsy. The attending physician, Dr. J. Bonder, later admitted to reporters, "We could not diagnose what was seen." His medical notes show several sentences begun, then heavily crossed out. The boy returned home. The church remained silent, but the phenomena intensified. By March 9, 1949, at the insistence of relatives, Roland and his mother relocated to St. Louis, Missouri, seeking calmer surroundings with extended family. The train ticket stubs preserved in family records show they traveled overnight, arriving just after dawn. The disturbances traveled with them. Witnesses, his cousins Charles and Helen, later recalled the noise beginning the first night, thumping inside the walls patterned like footsteps. The wood frame house creaked. Metal objects grew inexplicably cold. Letters between the boy's mother and the Archdiocese of St. Louis survive, preserved at St. Louis University. She wrote in careful penmanship that occasionally trembled. The frames jump from the walls. His bed moves each night between 2 and 3. He says Aunt Harriet tells him he cannot rest. The stationery bears small tear stains, possibly from fallen tears. The church appointed Father Raymond Bishop, S.J., to observe. His diary, now in restricted university archives, begins March 11, 1949, considered the most complete first-hand account of the case. The pages smell faintly of incense and tobacco. Archivists note that electronic equipment often malfunctions near the document box. Bishop approached with academic caution, but his entries quickly abandoned detachment for detailed cataloging of inexplicable events. The handwriting remains steady, but the ink darkens with pressure as the observations progress. Father Bishop's first entry is detached, scientific, composed in his office at St. Louis University, where leather-bound books lined the walls and a pendulum clock measured the hours. At 9:20 p.m., words appeared on the boy's torso. He groaned in discomfort. One word, Louis, clearly legible. The entry includes precise measurements of room temperature, 72 degrees, and barometric pressure. Interpreting it as a command to bring the child to St. Louis, Bishop coordinated with Father William Bodern, a parish priest with experience counseling traumatized soldiers after the war. The church required psychiatric clearance before any rite, a step confirmed in internal correspondence later quoted by Blatty. Medical records from St. Louis City Hospital dated March 14th show examination for hallucination, schizophrenia, and epilepsy. All tests returned negative, yet each attempt at normal life failed. At school, Roland's desk shook violently. The nun supervising dismissed it as adolescent play. Nights were worse, clawing, bedding torn from beneath him, a crucifix sliding down the wall. Metal items in the room grew cold enough to frost. The diary note simply, "Phenomena verified by 3 adults. Will request major rite." An internal church memorandum dated March 15th bears Archbishop Ritter's signature. Permission granted for solemn rite. Documentation mandatory. Permission was granted March 16th. Bodern, assisted by Fathers Halloran and Bishop, began the solemn ritual in a small bedroom within the Alexian Brothers Hospital, a Catholic medical facility. The room smelled of antiseptic and beeswax candles. The click of a rosary against wooden bedposts punctuated the Latin prayers. Outside, spring arrived, but the windows remained shuttered. The exorcism log, later quoted in Jesuit Studies Review, 1972, records over 30 sessions across 6 weeks. The boy exhibited violent strength, spitting, cursing in Latin phrases none could confirm he knew. Scratches would appear spelling hell and exit. The marks were photographed by hospital staff, though the negatives were reported damaged in development. Nurses avoided the room after 10 p.m. The night log shows staff requesting transfers. Bodern's diary reads, "Air became oppressively cold. Novice nurses refused duty. One crucifix bent backward. The metal crucifix, now stored in the Jesuit archives, shows a 40-degree bend at its center." Despite exhaustion, Bodern persisted, performing prayers nightly. When the child screamed, "I am Legion," the priest ordered silence. For a moment, witnesses reported total stillness, then a foul odor of sulfur and metal filled the hall. Hospital maintenance records show requests for ventilation system inspection. Church records confirm those 2 nights were left unrecorded. Tape recorders failed. The reels exist, blank. The strain fractured everyone involved. By early April, Bodern began vomiting after each service, diagnosed with nervous exhaustion. Medical charts preserved in Alexian Brothers archives show his blood pressure at dangerous levels. Halloran's notes add human detail often omitted. We feared the boy would die. He looked beyond us, pleading yet mocking. His handwriting, usually precise, became rushed, letters crowding together. The family begged to stop. The boy's mother claimed an unseen Aunt Harriet whispered to her during Mass, "He must finish." The church insisted completion. The ritual continued while cherry blossoms bloomed outside unseen windows. At one climax, furniture in the room reportedly lifted. A chair leg later found embedded in the wall was archived under hospital property, not AX 1994934. Technicians, attempting photography, found each negative overexposed. Maintenance logs report persistent electrical disturbances on the floor. One entry notes, "Replace bulbs weekly, cause unknown." On April 18th, Easter Monday, the final session began. The air tasted metallic. Radiator pipes knocked in sequences of 3. The boy's temperature chart showed impossible fluctuations, from hypothermic to feverish within minutes. 3 priests gathered, their vestments rustling in the stillness. Outside, church bells announced the holiday. Inside, the clock stopped at 10:30 p.m. Something was ending or beginning. The diary's final active entry dictates, at 10:45 p.m., boy screamed, "Satan, Satan, I am Michael, and I command you." Convulsions followed, then sudden peace. The final line is written with such pressure that the pen nearly tore the page. Witness Halloran recalled the room becoming normal in temperature. A nearby church bell rang spontaneously, verified by the parish sacristan's log noting. Bell moved without puller, 10:47 p.m. Roland awakened calm, asking, "Did I do all that?" His voice, according to Bishop's notes, sounded younger, clearer. The air smelled only of hospital antiseptic. The constant knocking in the walls ceased. Medical staff observed him for 3 days. No further phenomena occurred. On April 21st, hospital discharge forms described the patient as alert, healthy. Blood tests showed normal values. The boy ate normally, slept without disturbance. The case appeared closed. Father Bodern required 2 weeks of medical leave. His personal journal, found decades later among his effects, contains only one reference. The battle ends, but war continues elsewhere. He returned to parish duties at St. Francis Xavier Church, where he would remain until his death in 1983. The Jesuits sealed their notes, marking them sub secreto, a matter of the church. Bodern never publicly spoke of the case again. The boy returned to Maryland with his family, enrollment records showing his completion of high school. But the story slipped out. On August 20, 1949, the Washington Post published a small article titled, "Priest Frees Matt Rainier Boy Held in Devil's Grip." No names given, but locals recognized Cottage City. The article referenced Catholic sources and described events in clinical terms, bizarre movements, strange sounds. The newspaper clipping, yellowed with age, resides now in the Georgetown University archives. The Post journalist Bill Brinkley later said in an interview, 1971, "Church officials didn't deny it, they just said it was over." His reporter's notebook donated to the museum contains marginal notes, doctors baffled, church cautious. Word spread across pastoral networks, then among Jesuit alumni. Notes were quietly photocopied by students at St. Louis University, circulating as the Exorcist Papers. Seminary discussions debated the theological implications. Hospital staff spoke in whispers. The case file grew thinner as pages were borrowed and never returned. By the 1960s, the case reached a Georgetown graduate named William Peter Blatty, who recalled reading about it during his student days. The Post article lay folded in his desk drawer. It would haunt him for decades, like a splinter working deeper. Cottage City residents avoided the house where it began. The property records show 3 owners in 5 years. Local children whispered that the windows watched them pass. The boy grew up. The priests grew old. But the story refused to fade. Blatty began his novel, The Exorcist, in 1969, working in a quiet Los Angeles apartment where traffic sounds filtered through drawn curtains. He secured church permission to read redacted diary excerpts, verified by correspondence between Blatty and Reverend William Bowdern, S.J., preserved at Georgetown University's Lounger Library. The letter granting access stipulates, names removed, certain phenomena details redacted. The real subject, he was told, was a boy. Blatty changed him to a girl, Regan MacNeil, to distance fiction from victim. Nevertheless, his narrative mirrored several documented events: the levitating bed, the voice phenomena, the exorcism fatigue of the priests. His manuscript, preserved in the special collections, shows multiple revisions to each supernatural scene. In a Time magazine interview, 1974, Blatty said, "The truth was stranger, sadder, and much less resolved." The magazine's fact-checker notes confirm he declined to elaborate. He kept a photo of the Cottage City house on his desk during writing. The Jesuit order, wary of sensationalism, refused to confirm details. Father Halloran, approached by reporters, would only say, "The church has procedures for such matters." Still, popular imagination conflated the novel's possession with Roland Doe's case. Fiction now. Overwrote fact. The novel's leather-bound first edition sits in Georgetown's collection, its spine permanently curved as if long held open. Director William Friedkin, himself a skeptic, was given partial access to Blatty's research in 1971. His production notes, preserved at the Academy Archive, show methodical investigation. He visited the Alexian Brothers Hospital, now renovated, where maintenance workers told him about the room no one wanted. Cold spots remained, electronics malfunctioned. He later visited the remaining Jesuit participants, Father Halloran, by then a chaplain in St. Louis. Halloran neither confirmed nor denied supernatural elements, stating instead, "I saw what I saw. Possibly psychogenic, possibly not. The boy suffered." The interview transcript shows long pauses. Tape recorder malfunction cut 30 minutes of conversation. When The Exorcist premiered in 1973, theaters reported fainting, panic, and public backlash. Parish offices received thousands of calls from people reporting similar disturbances. Church switchboards overloaded. One receptionist's log reads, 42 calls Wednesday, all asking if their children are possessed. The film stock itself generated stories. Production crews reported unexplained equipment failures, temperature drops on set. Within a year, both archdioceses quietly instituted new exorcism guidelines: no rites without psychiatric consultation and written diocesan permission. The 1949 case had changed institutional policy. New church directives, dated May 1974, reference previous procedural failures without naming the St. Louis case. The church never reopened the file, but the fascination never closed. In 1987, historian Thomas Allen gained limited access to the Jesuit archives, sitting at a wooden table beneath fluorescent lights that occasionally flickered. The clock on the wall ticked loudly in the silence. He published Possessed, The True Story of an Exorcism, 1993. He confirmed diary accuracy and identified physical artifacts: a bent crucifix, hospital sign-in sheets, and Father Bishop's shorthand notes. His research files contain photographs of the hospital room, now converted to storage, where plaster still showed unexplained gouges. The boy, still anonymous, reportedly alive until the early 2000s, became neither advocate nor opponent of his legend. "I led a quiet life," one unconfirmed letter signed RM stated, found among Allen's donated research at Georgetown. The handwriting bears similarities to school records from 1950. The postmark shows St. Louis, though no return address appears. Yet museum staff at St. Louis University claim curious things: recorder malfunctions near the archive box, cold drafts from sealed walls, and the smell of iron during cataloging. Preservation notes mention unusual deterioration patterns on the diary pages. One archivist reported her pen leaked inexplicably while transcribing Bishop's notes. "It was meant to be just an exhibit," one archivist said. during a 2012 oral history, but sometimes the recordings pick up whispering. The digital file of that interview contains 10 seconds of unexplained static at timestamp 2349. The film and its legend overshadowed the human cost. In church minutes, Bodern's final remark reads simply, "The family was restored to grace." His personal effects, cataloged after death, included a small box of prayers for Roland, dated annually on April 18th, the anniversary. The ink faded with passing years. Standing inside the university's restricted room, the narrator, our investigator, sets down the microfilm slowly. The overhead light flickers against the lacquered wooden box labeled 1949. The case file itself sits in climate-controlled preservation, its leather cover cracked with age. Policy forbids photography. Out of respect, the investigator leaves a small card. In remembrance of all involved, the security camera hums. For a moment, the sound mixes with faint scratchings on the tape. Museum staff report that monthly temperature checks show the case area runs consistently 3 to 5 degrees colder than surrounding areas. Electrical equipment frequently requires replacement. The recorder's counter freezes at 00:13:49, then resumes on its own. The technician's log notes equipment irregularity without elaboration. No data anomaly found. The archive remains sealed. Visitor logs show scholars still request access annually, most departing with fewer notes than intended. But visitors still report a pressure near the case, as if something behind that glass still listens when its story is told. No sin, no sermon, only the observable pattern. A death unattended, grief unspoken, authority invoked too late. Every page documented more than disturbance. It recorded belief trying to explain unbearable loss. That belief still breathes, quietly, each time someone presses play on the archive recordings. The last known photograph of Roland Doe, taken at his high school graduation, shows a thin young man with downcast eyes. His school records indicate he studied engineering. The yearbook contains no personal quote beneath his picture, only blank space. Father Bowdern's grave in Calvary Cemetery receives occasional visitors who leave prayer cards. Cemetery staff report finding Latin prayers written on paper slips, weighted with small stones. The groundskeeper notes that electronic equipment, phones, watches, cameras, often malfunction near the site. In the St. Louis University archives, the case file remains the most requested yet most restricted document. The current curator, when asked about the phenomena, replied, "Some stories resist conclusion." Her predecessor retired early after reporting voice anomalies in the empty reading room. The wooden box bearing the 1949 label sits behind glass now, closed but not forgotten. Visitors pause before it, their reflections overlapping its surface. The motion sensor light above it burns out monthly. The digital thermometer beside it reads 3 degrees lower than any other display case. Record ends here.